I'm not young. I'm not exactly old either, probably older than most of you reading this, though. I grew up in a time before cell phones. The internet was a pretty new thing, and we most certainly didn't have places like this to share weird or scary stories. I wish there had been something like that, though. Maybe I would have got some advice, or at least had a better record than a spotty memory hazed over with the alcohol and drug use of my 20s. Honestly, I had mostly forgotten about the truth of this incident. That is, until recently when it all came flooding back like a nightmarish wave. I think my brain protected me from the trauma, buried it so deep it took a long time to come back to the surface. It's at the surface now, though. Now that it's back. Yeah, I'm jumping ahead, though. Let's start at the beginning. The year was 1996. I was 14 years old, living in a small California town. My parents had purchased a house in the mountains. My father had become disenfranchised with life in the city, and he wanted to go somewhere that our closest neighbor was nearly a mile away. I can't say it made me or my sister Katie too terribly happy. We lost all of our friends and ended up in this small town school that involved an hour-long bus ride to and from the campus. She made new friends quickly. She was 2 years older than me, pretty popular and the kind of person that people were drawn to. I, on the other hand, was short, awkward, and quiet. Suffice to say, I got picked on a lot, and I didn't adjust super well. My father saw it as an opportunity to toughen me up and teach me some things about how to take care of our new home. Well, if you're just going to be sitting around the house all summer anyway, then you might as well learn some life skills, that sort of thing. So that was that. I took one last look at my new PlayStation and my new copy of Resident Evil that I'd saved my allowance for, and I was put to work. I cleaned gutters, mowed the lawn, helped my dad repaint the garage, and finally, the most important task to this story, I helped him build a new woodshed. I say helped, but in reality, he talked me through it, and I actually did the majority of the labor. I think he always wished that I was more the type to work with my hands, even though, especially at that age, I was more into drawing, writing, and video games than sitting out in the sun and building a shed. "We gotta get you some calluses, kiddo," he would say while slapping my back. "It builds character." I'm not sure if I built any character, but I damn sure built that woodshed. Old grocery store pallets made up the flooring, but the walls and the roof were these huge corrugated aluminum sheets, and it made sure that the rain ran off and away from the wood piles. I cut myself so many damn times getting those sheets in place. I looked like I'd lost a fight with a razor blade factory. Badly. Sometimes I wonder if all the blood I spilled in that grass summoned him. Like I accidentally performed some ritual that I was totally unaware of. Step 1. Spill a couple of pints of blood on your backyard lawn. Step 2. Curse profusely while putting up a woodshed with your dad laughing at you the whole time. Step 3. Spend every night praying to whatever damn deity will listen that you don't have to spend another second working on that goddamn shed. And then step 4. Summon an unholy evil that will permanently scar you and leave a broken mess repressing memories for the majority of your life. Pretty shit ritual, if you ask me. I am joking, though. It has nothing to do with the blood, or even the shed, really. The shed's just where it first appeared. I can remember that night with more clarity than I really want to. It was the night that I finished building. I remember my dad actually telling me that I had done a good job as he inspected my work. He brought me a Coke with dinner. He said it would be a beer if I was a little older. And honestly, I appreciated the gesture. I know that I make him seem like a hard ass, but the reality was that he was a good man, just very old school in his sensibilities. After dinner, I went up to my room and, oh my god, finally spent some time playing my game. My sister had left for the night. She was going on her first date with this boy that she'd met at school. Since she was going to be out late, my parents agreed that I had earned it and said that I could stay up as late as I liked. My hands hurt, and I was exhausted, but honestly, I didn't care. I felt like I'd earned my time to relax and enjoy myself, and it felt good. So I stayed up way too late. Clock rolled over to 1:30, and I finally told myself that I should probably get some sleep because who knew what chore Dad had for me that next day. And after getting ready for bed, I went to my window and looked down at the yard at my handiwork. I was actually pretty proud of myself. And that's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was my dad, but as my eyes adjusted, looking in the dark, I realized that no, he was far too tall, far too lanky, and much too pale. His clothes hung off his thin frame in ragged tatters and billowed in the night breeze. He walked around the shed, sliding his hand against the aluminum walls, tink, 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 sound of his nails clicking against the bends in the metal. Corrugations, I think you call them. Then he looked up at me. There was a shine in his eyes, like the shine a raccoon has when you catch it hunting through your trash. His face was gaunt, pale. Sunken cheeks made his cheekbones look like sharp daggers jutting out of the sides of his face, and his mouth was little more than a thin line of nothing drawn onto his low-set jaw. It wriggled slightly as he fixed his gaze on me. Awake too late. It spoke. I mean, I shouldn't have been able to hear its soft whisper from where I was, yet I could, very easily. It rang in my ears with a pitch similar to someone rubbing a wetted finger on a half-full crystal glass. Its stutter, a manufactured weakness, like its weak-looking frame. Come out to play, or I come in. It cocked its head at an unnatural angle and twisted it further and further until it was looking at me almost upside down. It hummed, and the drone filled the air around me. The floor beneath my feet vibrated at the odd frequency, and it resonated through my legs up into my chest. I tried to cry out to my parents, but I felt paralyzed. I still don't know if it did something to me or I was just so scared I couldn't move. I watched as it twisted its body into a bizarre angle and skittered from the woodshed to the side of the house. I could hear it clambering up the wall toward my window. My feet suddenly broke free from their place in the ground, and I stumbled backward toward the door to my room. "Dad! Mom!" I remember saying the words, but I honestly can't be sure if it was a shout or a whisper, though I would realize that it really didn't matter. The face suddenly appeared in my second-story window. It was close enough now that I could better make out its features. Its eyes still gleamed from the sunken place in its sockets, and the lime mouth still quivered as it hummed that awful noise. Paper-thin skin was stretched tightly across its skull. You could almost make out the blood pumping in its veins on its face. The humming stopped as its mouth stretched open in an awful, void-like maw, and it clapped its jaws together quickly and sharply over and over again, and the snapping noise of its mouth opening and closing at high speed sounded like a camera shutter quickly taking pictures. I barely had time to think if I had locked my window before the creature slid its bony fingers into the crack of the windowsill and lifted it. It slithered through like liquid, and before it touched the ground, I'd flung my bedroom door open and ran into the hallway towards my parents' room. They were still soundly asleep in their bed, of course. I ran over to my father and started shaking him, trying to wake him up, but it was like he was in a coma. I shook and shook him, but his eyes stayed closed and his body stayed still. I ran around the bed to try the same thing with my mother, screaming like a madman the whole time for them to wake up. Sleep like little angels. Sleep like the dead. It stood in my parents' doorway. It looked taller than before, as if it was wreathed in shadow. Its head twisted unnaturally again, and it wrapped its fingers around the door frame as if it was about to pounce. That's when I heard the front door open. It was quiet, my sister trying to sneak in after her curfew. Not quiet enough, though. The thing spun its head around quickly, reacting to the new presence in the house, and before I could react, it was making its way to the stairs with that unnatural grace and fluidity. Its hands and feet clawed along the walls, knocking pictures down. I could hear them breaking on the ground. I ran after it, not even sure what the hell I was planning to do. I watched it vanish down the stairs and heard my sister let out one of the most terrifying screams that I've ever heard. Even when I had convinced myself that there was never a monster, that it had simply been a human intruder in our home that night, I never forgot the sound of that scream. From the top of the stairs, I watched as the thing encircled my sister like a constrictor, its thin fingers grabbing her throat and squeezing to cut short that awful scream into a painful wheeze. It opened its mouth again and made that camera shutter clack a few more times before it did something that I can't even begin to fathom or properly do justice to with words. It drained the life from her. I could see it happening. Her eyes were wide with terror as her form seemed to blur, and what I could most accurately describe as her soul was ripped from her body and into that horrid creature's open mouth. Her hair turned white and her skin went pallid and gray until she almost looked like the thing that was killing her. I bolted down the stairs in an attempt to stop what I was seeing, but I was quickly flung away as it reached an arm out and threw me backwards with little to no effort. I slammed hard against the stairway and heard my leg snap. I watched, screaming myself in a mix of terror and pain as it drained every last drop of life from my sister and left her in a sunken, wide-eyed shell on the floor of our entryway. I knew I was next. It stared at me with those gleaming eyes rolling in their sockets and stretched that thin line of a mouth into a facsimile of a smile. And then it turned away and slithered through the half-open front door. I was left alone, legs shattered, mind broken, staring helplessly at my sister's lifeless corpse. It felt like I was laying there for hours, soaking in the scene around me, the pain in my leg fading to shock, and thoughts racing through my mind as to why it hadn't killed me too. The screams of my parents when they finally woke up and found us seemed like they were happening in another world, like distant cries of pain being carried on the wind. My parents never really recovered from the loss. The police created a narrative that made sense to them. A prowler breaks into an isolated home. The kids, myself and my sister, startled this prowler and he attacks us. My leg is broken and my poor sister, is apparently scared to death. Heart failure due to an acute stress response. What kind of 16-year-old girl has heart failure from being scared? My parents bought it, though, unfortunately. They never forgave themselves for sleeping through the encounter, despite the fact that the creature had obviously put them in some kind of comatose state while he attacked us. My mother and father separated a few years later, and shortly after that, Dad drank himself to death. Mom hasn't spoken to me in years. She fell down her own shame spiral that led her to isolating herself from us to protect herself from the pain. I, on the other hand, just forgot as much about the encounter as my mind would allow. I, too, decided the police's story was easier to digest than the truth. Maybe it helped. Maybe I'd be a raving lunatic otherwise. I can't say remembering all of this now has helped my mental health at all. And that brings us to now, and what brought back those memories in the first place. A much shorter story, but one that I'm hoping won't be my last to tell. 3 nights ago, I saw it again. I'd gotten home from work and I was trying to relax and watch some television before bed. I ended up falling asleep in my chair and woke up to an infomercial playing way too loud. I shut off the TV and checked my phone. It was 1:30 in the morning. Again. In that moment, a chill went down my spine, that first tinge of memory coming to me like a frigid wave. I felt compelled to go to my window, almost like some unseen hand was guiding me. I know how that sounds, but it is the truth. I looked out into the courtyard of my apartment building, expecting to see the parking lot and entranceway, and instead I saw my parents' backyard, a sight I hadn't seen in almost 30 years. There was the woodshed I had built, and standing next to it a tall, gaunt man dressed in flowing rags. His eyes shining and his head cocked at an unnatural angle. And I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Flashes of my sister's face, frozen in horror, burned behind my eyes, and before I knew it, the thing was at my window, peering in at me, unblinking. The window slowly opened as I backed away. The creature slid through the crack in that serpentine way it had of moving and stood before me, somehow even taller than I remember. Its thin line mouth dropped open and it released my sister's horrifying scream from somewhere deep down inside it before it did that quick shuddering motion. Sleep like the dead. It reached for me and I screamed, and then it was daylight. the creature was gone, and 7 hours had somehow passed. I spent a long time wondering if I was dead and just hadn't realized it. Maybe that would have been preferable. Maybe it would be better for me to be trapped inside that monstrosity like my sister. At least then, I wouldn't be wondering when it was coming back. Look, I'm all for the do-it-yourself stuff, but if you don't mind, I think I'm going to be leaving the home projects alone for a bit. Yeah? Anyway, stay scary, wildlings, and make the most of your nights.